Hello everyone, my name is Afrik-Ann. Welcome back again to my YouTube channel. In this channel, I bring you tutorials on dressmaking, bag making and fashion accessories. In today's video, I'm going to be sharing how to make this beautiful dress with a monostrap neckline. So please, if you are yet to subscribe to this channel, please do so by hitting the subscribe button and let's get started.
NCM Afrik-Ann.
These are the materials I'm going to be using to make this dress. I'll be combining these two fabrics to make my BUBU gown. So I'll be combining these two fabrics, and I also have my doll face satin here. I have about half yard. This is exactly half yard, and it will be more than enough for what I'll be using it for. You can use any plain fabric of your choice. I also have this light gum stay. I'll be using it for the design on the neck of my dress. I'll be drafting my dress first on this pattern paper because I'm going to be combining two fabrics to make this dress. But if you're using one fabric, you can go ahead and draft directly on your fabric. So because I'll be combining, I'll be mixing my fabric, so I'll be drafting my pattern on this pattern paper first before transferring it to my fabric. So the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to fold this pattern paper into two equal parts. So because this is cut together, I'm going to be taking my shoulder measurement from my center back to across my arm to wherever I want my sleeve length to be. I have a very detailed tutorial on how I made a BUBU dress. I'll be using the same pattern for this, and I'll be dropping the link on that. The tutorial is very detailed, so I'm not going to dwell on that in this. So the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to go down by 1 inch for my shoulder slope. So this is my center back. From there, I'm going to be marking out my neck measurement. So I'm going to be using 3.5 for the width of the neck, and I'll be using 4 inches for the neck depth. So after marking my neck measurement, I'm not going to cut this out now. I'm just going to notch the middle of this because I'll be opening this up to get the original neck of this dress. So for my shoulder, I'm going to be taking my vertical measurements. For my bust point, I'm going to come down by 11 inches, and my waist point is at 15 inches, but I will go up by 2 inches because this is a free dress. I'm going to be making a little shape from there. And my hip point is at 24 inches, so I'm just going to go ahead, and my dress length is 40 inches. I'll just go ahead and mark out all my vertical measurements before placing my horizontal measurements. So my bust measurement divided by 4 is 9 inches. I'm going to be adding 2 inches for ease allowance and 1 inch for sewing allowance. Together I have 12 inches. So I'm going to bring down my 12 inches to my waist point, but I'm going to be reducing it by 1.5 inches. Whatever measurement I have on my bust area, I'm going to be reducing it by 1.5 inches at my waist point. So at my hip point, my hip is 10 inches when I divide it by 4. So 10 inches plus 2 inches sewing, 2 inches ease allowance, and 1 inch sewing allowance. So whatever thing I have on my hip, I'm going to bring it down to my dress length. I'm going to be connecting all these points together. After drafting, I'll go ahead and cut this out. So after opening up my pattern, I'll go ahead and complete the neck measurement. So remember, I notched this middle to know where the center is. So what I have, the half part of this neck is 3.5 inches. I'm going to bring back my 3.5 inches here, and I'm going to continue. I'm going to complete the neck. I'm going to complete the neck measurement. So after doing this, it's at this point you're going to decide where you want your off shoulder to be. Remember, this is one off shoulder dress. So at this point, you're going to decide if you want your off shoulder to be at the left or the right part of your dress. So I want mine to be at the left part of my dress. So the next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to be dividing my shoulder measurement by 2. My shoulder measurement is 14 inches. 14 inches divided by 2 is 7 inches. So from this center, I'm going to place my 7 inches from this center, and I'm going to go out by 7 inches. For my center neck, I measured half of my shoulder measurement. So I'm going to mark out the new neck for this dress. So I've extended one side of the neck for my off shoulders. So after doing this, if you feel this is too small, you can go ahead and increase the neck width depending on how wide you want the neck of your dress to be. So the next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to be dividing this pattern into 2. Remember, I'm making this dress with 2 different fabrics, but if you are using one fabric, there won't be any need dividing this. So I'm going to divide this pattern into 2. So I'm going to place before cutting out the neck of this dress, because this is going to serve as a guideline, because this is where my strap is going to come. So I'm going to divide this. I'm just going to make a slant line like this. I'm not going to make it straight. After making this slant line, I'll go ahead and cut out the neck of the dress. So after separating this, I'm going to keep this aside and bring my fabric. I'm just going to fold this fabric into 2. I'm going to pick one of my patterns and I'll place it on my fabric. So before cutting this out, I'll be leaving half an inch at this center front, because I'll be joining my fabric here. So I'll be using this half an inch for my sewing allowance. So after marking out my half inch for my sewing allowance at the front, I'll go ahead and cut this out. You can see I left half inch sewing allowance at this point, so I didn't cut exactly on my pattern paper. I left half an inch for sewing allowance. So I'm just going to shift this aside. After working on this pattern, I'm going to keep it aside, still on my table. I'm going to bring my other fabric and I'll place it on fold. So after folding my second fabric, I'm going to bring my second pattern and I'm going to place it, making sure it's facing this other fabric the correct way. You can see it's facing it the correct way. That is why I still left this one on the table, so I don't mix things up. Go ahead and cut this out. So as you can see, I also left half an inch in front of this for my sewing allowance. So I'm going to take out my pattern. So after taking out my pattern paper, I'm going to pick one of these and I'm going to pick one of this. I'm going to take this to my sewing machine and I'm going to sew by half an inch. So I'm going to take this to my sewing machine and sew this together. So I've gone ahead to sew this together. So this is for my front and the back. So please make sure you iron this, you open this up and give it a very good press after sewing. So the next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to be working on the facing on the neck. This is the right side facing up. So I'll be marking out the facing for the neck of my dress. So I'm going to be using 2 inches for the wideness of my facing, but I'll be making this 3 inches because you know half inch is going to go in and half inch is going to go in. So by the time I finish, the wideness of this should be about 2 inches. I'm going to place my facing on my doll face again, right side facing right side. I'm going to place it like this and cut out exactly the same thing. After cutting this, at this point I'm going to bring my light gum stay and I'm going to place this on the shiny part of my gum stay. I'm going to take this to my ironing table and I'm going to give this a very good press. So I've ironed my gum stay on my doll face satin. So I also went ahead to fold this in by half an inch. I used my iron to fold this in by half an inch. So the next thing we are going to do, you are going to pick your fabric. So I'm going to be placing this on my neckline. So but before then, I just want to add lining to this dress because this fabric is very light. So I would like it to have lining. So but if your fabric is thick enough, you can go ahead and make this without your lining. So after cutting out my lining for the front and the back, I'm going to be reducing the length of my lining by 1 inch because I added 1 inch folding allowance on my actual fabric. So I'm going to be reducing the length of my lining by 1 inch. So after cutting out my lining, I'm just going to keep this aside and I'll start working on my actual fabric. So I'm going to pick the front part of my dress. So please, I want you to pay very good attention to this part. You know these two patterns look alike, but one is the front and one is the back. So the easiest way to know the front part of this, so remember when I was cutting out my neckline, I said I wanted my strap to be by the left side of my shoulder. So you can see this length is going towards the left side, is more on the left side. So this is how to easily know your front and your back. So depending on where you chose your off shoulder to be, so I chose my off shoulder to be at my left side. So you can see this is pointing towards my left. So the next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to be cutting out a very long strap that will start from my dress length and across my shoulder. So go ahead and cut a very long strap. So what I have here is 5 inches. The width of this is 5 inches. So I'm just going to take this to my sewing machine. I'm going to be closing this up by half an inch. After sewing this from the wrong side, I'll be using my safety pin to turn this out. After turning this out, I'm going to take this to my ironing table and give this a very good press. So I've gone ahead to iron this. I'll go back to my dress, the front part. Remember, I'm still working on the front part of my dress. So I'm going to be fixing my facing at this point. So I'm going to take this to my sewing machine and I'll be top stitching this. So remember, I'm using lining for this dress, but if you're not using lining for this dress, so just go ahead and fix it and fix your facing. But you're going to start from the back. After sewing by half an inch, you're going to turn this like this before top stitching. So because I'm going to be adding lining to this dress, I'll be using my lining to turn this in. So the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to take this to my sewing machine and I'm going to top stitch my facing on my dress. So after fixing this, the next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to get my strap. So I'm going to start fixing this from my dress length. So as you can see, I have more of the black on this side. So I'm just going to shift this in. So I'm just going to let about ½ inch of this on this lemon part and I'll have more of it on this orange part. So I'm going to take this to my sewing machine and I'm going to be top stitching this on my dress. I'm going to be top stitching this on my dress. But when I get to this part, when I get to the neck part, I'm going to stop at about 1/2 inch, because you know I'm still going to turn this in with my lining. So after fixing my strap, this is what I have. So please take note of this. If you're fixing lining in your dress, you can see I didn't sew this to the end because I'm going to be using my lining to turn this in. So I stopped by 1/2 inch. So I'm going to keep this aside and I'm going to bring my back pattern. So I'll go ahead and fix my facing on my back pattern just as I did for the front. After fixing the facing on the back of my dress, so it's time to extend this strap to the back of my dress. So I'm going to be cutting out the excess, but first of all I'm going to measure out my neck depth. Remember I took 4 inches for my neck depth, so I'm going to be replacing the 4 inches I took for my neck depth. And I'm going to add another 4 inches for the back. And I'll be adding 1/2 inch for sewing allowance. So I'm just going to cut this out. So this is going to be like this. By the time we finish, we should have something like this. So next I'm going to do, I'm going to be extending this to the back pattern. So I'm just going to place this on this, and I'm going to sew this by 1/2 inch. So after extending this strap to the back pattern, you should have something like this. So it's time to fix the lining. So I'm going to pick up my lining and I'll be sewing this to the neck of my dress first. So remember I left 1/2 inch for my lining. So I'm going to be using it to fix my lining on this part. And at the bottom. So I've neatly fixed my lining on my front pattern. You can see how nice and neat it's looking. So I'll go ahead and do the same thing for the back pattern. I'll go ahead and fix my lining the same way I did at the front. So I'm just going to sew this by 1/2 inch and turn out. So I've gone ahead to fix my lining. You can see how beautiful the finishing is looking. So the next thing after fixing my lining, I'll go ahead and join the shoulders of this dress. After joining the shoulders of my dress, so I'll go ahead and fix this band for the 2 sleeves. So what I have here is about 2.5 inches on fold. So this is on fold, 2.5 inches. I'll use it to go and create my band on the sleeves of my dress. So I've gone ahead to fix the band on my sleeves. You can see how beautiful it's looking. So we are almost done. So the next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to turn this to the wrong side. I'll take this to my sewing machine. I'm going to sew this by the sides. I'm going to sew the sides by 1 inch. After joining the 2 sides, I'll be making a little notch around this curve so that my dress will relax very well on me. So friends, this is all for this dress. Let me know what you think about this tutorial in the comment section, and please subscribe, like and share. Thanks for watching and see you in my next video. Bye.